Hi, I'm Dr. Blair Masters. I wanted to talk about something today that may affect you, and if not, and you know someone who is affected by this, if you would please forward this video on to them, it may make a huge difference. I recently, and I was kind of called to do this video because of this, I recently had two different cases unrelated to each other come to me within the last week, and the younger person had kind of almost had a mental breakdown. They were in a situation where they had a lot of anxiety, particularly this one girl, a lot of unable to cope with her surroundings, and her mother had actually kind of moved in with her. The other one was a fellow who was off at college and had a huge amount of stress that he was going through because he was with finals and that sort of thing, and really was having some significant issues in dealing with his situation in his life. Anyway, then, and I don't know how we got on their mailing list, but Current Psychiatry came in the mail, and we've been getting this for a couple months. I think we just probably ended up on their mailing list, and I saw this one particular article, and I thought, that kind of applies to the situation that I'm seeing. And it is called, "Is the Contemporary Mental Health Crisis Among Youth Due to DMN Disruption?" And DMN stands for Default Mode Network. Now, this is a term in brain function that relates to different parts of the brain kind of properly communicating with each other. And if they aren't doing that properly, it can cause problems. This DMN network will lower its activity when you're really, really focused in on something and you're less aware of what is going on around you. Well, this can have some significant consequences if you're in this focus mode for a long period of time, such as, and I'm talking a long period of time, not just, I'm studying for finals for, a month or something like that. Things like, I'm watching video games and playing video games, and I'm seriously focused on this for years at a time, and it shuts off this network that kind of helps different parts of the brains communicate, and helps you kind of be aware of what is going on around you, and adapting to what is going on around you and dealing with that properly, and that sort of thing. There was a couple quotes in this article that I thought were very interesting, and I'm going to get to some steps that you can take that will help this. But it says this author, it was authored by Henry Narshall. He's a medical doctor, and he's the editor-in-chief of Current Psychiatry. Quote, "The advent of smartphones, social media, and video games addiction may have disrupted the development of brain networks in children and adolescents, leading to the current escalating epidemic of mental disorders in youth." And then another quote that I wanted to bring up was some things that you can do about it, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. But one of the steps and one of the things that I saw in both of these young folks who came to me was a significant issue that relates to diet. And what I did was I drew on here what's called a cell membrane, and basically all communication in the brain and the nerves takes place at the cell membrane. And essentially there'd be another cell up here, and electrical current comes down, and the cell turns the electrical signal temporarily into a chemical signal, and that chemical signal is sent on to the next cell, which is represented by this here. And once that chemical attaches enough to this cell, then this cell says, that cell's telling me something, and I'm going to send the electrical signal on. And this is how things happen in the brain. This is how communication happens. And this could be communication that's very specific, like bend your finger, okay, something like that. or just something very general like, oh, I'm relaxed, I'm happy, I'm anxious, those sorts of signals as well, things that you don't really think about all the time, or even things like, oh, our stomach is full, we better start digesting our food, that sort of thing that's even subconscious. This stuff goes on all the time. So this is a really important situation. And what should happen, and I wrote S here, and that represents serotonin. Now the reason I use that is serotonin is this chemical in the body that's like, oh, everything's fine. We're all calm, we're relaxed, we're happy, everything's great. And people don't notice a lot when they don't have a lot of adrenaline, oh, my adrenaline's really low, but they do notice when they're low on serotonin because their anxiety increases, they get depressed, they have trouble sleeping, they notice the lack of this chemical in particular is why I'm bringing it up as an example. So what should happen is the cell up here squirts out enough of this serotonin, and I'm drawing a little line on here, and you'll see why here in a second. But this, I'm representing a chemical situation graphically. So this isn't exactly how it works, but it's very, very close to this. So when enough serotonin comes along and attaches to the receptor site on this cell, then, like I said, that cell sends the signal on, and everything's great. Everything's happy. And in order for this to occur properly, you have to have the right kinds of fats, right kinds of fatty acids in the cell membrane. And you can see I have depicted here omega-3s, 6s, and 9s in kind of a nice ratio. A lot of 3s, a lot of 6s, a lot of 9s. They're all kind of even. When you have an excess of omega-6s in the cell membrane, then the receptor site becomes bent or non-receptive, essentially, because these 6s are different chemically than the 3s and the 9s, and they make the receptor sites less able to receive the chemical communication from the cell above. So the serotonin, in our example, comes along and tries to stick its tail down in there, and it can't do it. So the body has to produce more and more of this, and for it to work. And this is one of the reasons why selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are antidepressant drugs, work, is they keep these serotonins from going back into the cell up here, and they keep it out here, so eventually enough of them get stuck in these receptor sites, and the signal is sent on, and people tend to feel better. What you can do if you're in a situation where you have depression, anxiety, that sort of thing, and this won't affect any medication that you're on at all, is take omega-3 supplementation. And this is the thing that I recommended for both of these patients who came to me recently, just last week. I recommended for both of them 10,000, that's a lot, milligrams per day of fish oil. Sorry, my handwriting's not the greatest. And that's a really high dose, but when there are mental issues, Alzheimer's, depression of chronic nature, anxiety, any kind of brain dysfunction, MS, Parkinson's, that sort of thing, they usually recommend this dose for about 4 weeks and then cut down from there. But this will rapidly replace the 6s with the 9s. And when I say rapidly, I don't want you to think it's like take a pill and oh, you're good, or a couple days and you'll feel better. This happens over several weeks. And I usually recommend people stay on this dose for about 4 weeks and then cut down, like I said, cut down from there. If you are in a situation where you have depression, anxiety, that sort of thing, this occurs with serotonin. However, they have done studies that say, oh, if you are depressed, you're way more likely to have things like diabetes. Or they've done other studies that say, oh, if you have diabetes, you're way more likely to be depressed. And it's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of a situation. However, if you're having this go on with serotonin, you could have exactly the same thing go on with insulin, and insulin not be able to attach, and you become insulin resistant. And that's like a pre-diabetic state, or can continue into diabetes. So the cell membrane is really, really vital for you to be healthy and for your brain to work right. There are a couple other suggestions that this article brings up, and it is kind of difficult because, we live in our modern society, and, I use a computer and cell phone all day long. I'm the worst. I'm on the screen all the time. As a matter of fact, I'm filming this on my phone right now, and I'm going to be editing it on my computer here in just a little bit. So it's practically impossible to get 100% away from your screens. However, doing that temporarily can have profound effects, especially if you're in a situation where you're doing activities that require focus somewhere else. The author of this article says, this problem can be modulated and improved by meditation, is one of the things he recommends. Mentalizing. Now, what the heck is mentalizing? He recommended previously in the article things like, for adolescents, he was talking about daydreaming, thinking, processing things, and not just always having new information coming from a screen somewhere. Exercise is a huge factor, and then he recommends psychotherapy as well. Anyway, get away from your screens, turn off the TV, turn off the computer, even if it's just for a little while, and go do something that requires some, I should say, less brain activity. When I say that, I don't mean that you shut things off, but you're in a situation where you kind of like, I'm not focused on any particular thing right now. I'm taking a walk in the woods. I'm going for a bike ride. I'm playing a sport, so I'm exercising and thinking at the same time. One of the things that I really like to do when I go on vacation is to go sailing. And man, if you're not paying attention when you're sailing, things can go wrong in a hurry. You can't be thinking about the office. You can't be thinking about your computer. You can't be thinking about things that are outside of what's kind of going on in front of you and around you. Look at that boat, look at this boat, look at the weather, how's the sailboat going, and that sort of thing. You just look for activities such as that, and we've got lots of opportunities here in Northwest Arkansas. We got a great trail system that you can go out and go for a walk on. The weather's been beautiful lately. It's not too hot. Just do something other than being in front of a screen, and then optimize your nutrition, particularly your omega-3 6 ratio, by cutting back on things like grains and grain-based foods, and then increasing fish oil, as I discussed here. So I hope this was helpful.